Things are absolutely critical and out of control already in American society. We are not at risk of a widespread crisis. We are living in one. Consider the following. Thousands are dying, and millions are predicted to die as a direct consequence of unforced and illegal acts by the current U.S. presidency. The November elections have been openly threatened by President Trump. The Trump administration has invaded Iran with an open call for regime change without any authorization by Congress, contrary to the United States Constitution, having done a similar thing in Venezuela just weeks prior, and is currently posturing towards Cuba. The Trump administration credibly threatened Greenland with invasion, something serious enough to provoke mobilization of Allied troops and aircraft into the territory before he called off his threats, at least temporarily. Trump threatened to subvert the sovereignty of the Canadian people by continuously suggesting that Canada be annexed as the 51st state. Trump called for the mass displacement of the native people of Gaza and provided rhetorical and financial support for the disproportionate attacks by Israel against Gaza residents during the recent conflict in Palestine. The Trump administration sent dozens of immigrants to Sikot prison in El Salvador, a place known at the time to use systematic torture against inmates and where virtually no inmates had previously been released alive. The Trump administration committed perhaps the most heinous act of all, illegally and abruptly shutting down the congressionally appropriated USAID program in February and March of 2025, with no wind-down procedures to minimize or mitigate the loss of life and the loss of aid beforehand, resulting in an unforced international crisis. The Lancet journal, one of the top 2 international medical research publications, published a study in July of 2025 concluding that up to 14 million people would die by 2030 from these cuts unless they were reversed. This is no longer in the political realm, not a matter of public opinion or policy preference. This is in a category of gross human rights abuses, violation of longstanding international norms, and a destruction of the rule of law. And for the people of a powerful free nation to allow this to go on and on for a year now, and for their leaders to be paralyzed, no, catatonic, is another level of catastrophe altogether. The impact is compounding globally as well as within the smaller community of democracies once led by the United States. In America's constitutional republic, each citizen has a shared responsibility for the government that they have elected. There is widespread access to a large variety of sources of news to inform each citizen about public and policy events. There is a protected freedom of speech to assemble, debate, discuss, collaborate, and collate information and policies, and to formulate responses. Anyone entrusted with the title of leader has even greater levels of responsibility to be aware of current events and to hold opinions and positions on the same, so that they can properly lead those they represent at all levels. It's been a year now, more than enough time for everyone to become aware enough to formulate an educated, well-reasoned opinion. There is no more time for excuses. So it is time for each of us to call, text, or write everyone with whom we voluntarily associate and anyone we call a leader and ask, do you or do you not stand for the Trump administration illegally and abruptly shutting down the USAID program, an act which has already killed people and is set to kill up to 14 million of the world's poorest by 2030 if not reversed? Do you support sending immigrants to the torture prison Sikot in El Salvador and other known torture sites abroad? Do you support threatening Greenland with invasion and Canada with illegal annexation against international law? And do you support threatening residents of Gaza with mass displacement while funding Israel's cruelty against Palestinians? Because if you do not publicly and clearly stand against the Trump administration, and if you fail to call for the perpetrators of atrocities to be brought to justice, then consider this notice that I will now put a hard pause on our relationship until such time as you can come to your senses and do what is right. But meanwhile, I will not voluntarily support your despicable morally indispensable position, and I care enough to call you out for it, and I plead with you to change course immediately. This is not hateful, quite the opposite. Each of us is called to love our neighbor enough to make it crystal clear. Trump and his MAGA enablers are engaged in evil, and anyone who supports them shares in that evil. I am a doctor, and if a patient of mine has cancer, I'd be a bad doctor indeed if I failed to tell them that they had cancer and failed to recommend the fastest way to remove that cancer from their body. The goal of every one of us should be for love, forgiveness, grace, and restoration among all people worldwide. But we must first stop the killing, the torture, the crime, and the destruction occurring on our watch. Trump's MAGA agenda is a cancer in our society and in the world. It must be denounced and opposed by all decent people. And for those of us with responsibilities of being citizens in this once great nation, or the high duty of being leaders, must take measures to legally and peacefully stop what is going on. This begins with being on record with your public opposition. We are witnessing an exploding emergency, and the ones who must respond are we ourselves. That response must start now.